The last patient to leave Waverly Hills Sanatorium signed their papers in June 1961. The huge Gothic building sits on the outskirts of Louisville, Kentucky. It fell silent after serving as a tuberculosis hospital for 50 years. But according to dozens of witnesses over the past 60 years, something never left those empty halls. Security guards report elevator doors opening and closing on empty floors. Urban explorers describe children's laughter echoing from the kids' wing. Ghost hunters claim to have recorded hundreds of voices. The building sits empty. Yet people living nearby still see lights moving through the windows at night. What happened at Waverly Hills during its working years that might explain these reports? The answer lies buried in medical records. Patient stories tell the tale. The grim numbers of America's deadliest disease reveal the truth. When Louisville's Board of Tuberculosis Hospital opened Waverly Hills in 1910, tuberculosis was killing 150 people every day across the United States. The disease showed no mercy to age or social class. Entire families would die within months of the first cough. Children as young as 6 were taken from their parents. They were locked away in hospitals for years. Dr. David Stewart was the hospital's first head doctor. He believed that fresh air, sunshine, and rest could cure even the worst cases of tuberculosis. The original 2-story building housed 20 patients on a hilltop. The location was chosen for its high height and wind patterns. Each room had large windows and sleeping porches. Patients would spend hours outdoors. They stayed outside even during Kentucky's harsh winters. The early years looked hopeful. Recovery rates at Waverly Hills were better than most other places. Patients wrote letters home describing gardens and fun activities. They felt hopeful. But by 1918, the number of tuberculosis cases in Louisville had tripled. The small building could no longer hold all the patients arriving daily. Building began on a massive new structure in 1924. The 5-story building could house 400 patients. It featured the latest medical equipment. Operating rooms filled the 4th floor. The 5th floor housed the worst cases. These were patients unlikely to get better. A separate children's wing held the youngest patients. Dr. Stewart retired in 1928. Dr. Harold Kleinert replaced him. Kleinert brought more harsh treatment methods. Artificial pneumothorax procedures collapsed infected lungs to help healing. Thoracoplasty removed ribs to permanently reduce lung size. Electroshock therapy treated patients whose mental state got worse during long stays. The hospital records show that between 1928 and 1943, over 3,000 patients died at Waverly Hills. Some died from the disease itself. Others died from trial treatments. The death rate reached 40% during the worst years. This made it one of the deadliest medical places in America. Patient rooms were cramped and overcrowded. Multiple patients shared single rooms designed for one person. The air was thick with germs and the smell of sickness. Windows stayed open year-round to provide fresh air. But this meant patients froze in winter and baked in summer. The daily routine was strict and unchanging. Patients woke at dawn for temperature checks. Meals were bland and often cold by the time they reached upper floors. Rest periods were required. Talking was not allowed to save energy for healing. Many patients went weeks without speaking to another person. Families could visit only twice per week for 2 hours each time. Many lived too far away to make regular trips. Some patients never saw their loved ones again after entering Waverly Hills. Letters were the only link to the outside world. But even mail was delayed and checked by hospital staff. The smell inside Waverly Hills was overwhelming and constant. The odor of death mixed with strong cleaning chemicals. Blood and other fluids stained floors and walls. Despite constant cleaning, the building always smelled of sickness and decay. New patients often threw up from the smell alone. Staff worked in terrible conditions day after day. They watched people die constantly. Many nurses quit after just a few weeks. Others stayed, but became hard and cold to protect themselves. The turnover rate was high. Training was poor. Mistakes happened often and were usually deadly. Margaret Collins arrived at Waverly Hills in September 1935 at age 14. Her family diary was donated to the Louisville Historical Society. The entries describe her experience. They were written in pencil on yellowed pages. They provide a haunting look into daily life at the hospital. "The nurses tell us we're getting better," Margaret wrote in October, "but Sarah in the next bed hasn't spoken in 3 days. She just stares at the ceiling and coughs up blood. I tried to hold her hand yesterday, but it was so cold." Margaret's condition got better at first. She gained weight and her fever went down. But by December, her entries became more upset. "They moved me to the 5th floor today. Everyone here is dying. I can hear them crying at night. Some call for their mothers. Others just make gurgling sounds." The final entry in Margaret's diary is dated the 18th of January, 1936. "Dr. Kleinert says they need to try something new. He showed me pictures of patients who got better after the surgery. Their backs are all crooked now, but they can breathe. I'm scared, but I want to go home." Margaret Collins died 3 days after her surgery. Hospital records list the cause of death as surgery problems. She was 15 years old. She never saw her family again. Stories like Margaret's happened hundreds of times during Waverly Hills' working years. The hospital's own records show that between 1935 and 1940, surgery death rates were over 60% for patients under 18. Many children died without ever seeing their families again. The 5th floor became known as the death floor among staff. This is where the sickest patients went. Room after room held people in their final stages. Some were unconscious for weeks before dying. Others remained awake and aware until the end. The screaming and crying from this floor could be heard throughout the building. Room 517 was known as the worst room on the death floor. Patients sent there rarely came back. The room faced north and got no direct sunlight. It was always cold and damp. The walls were stained with bodily fluids that couldn't be cleaned. No patient wanted to be moved to room 517. Nurses worked 12-hour shifts with little rest. They watched patients die daily. Some quit after just weeks on the job. Others stayed for years but became hardened to the suffering around them. Turnover was high. Training was minimal. Mistakes were common and often deadly. The night shift was the worst duty at Waverly Hills. Patients died most often in the early morning hours. Nurses would find beds empty when they made their rounds. Bodies had to be removed quickly before other patients saw them. But everyone knew what the empty beds meant. The hospital kept strict isolation rules. Patients were forbidden from leaving their assigned floors. Visiting hours were limited to 2 hours weekly. Mail was cleaned and delayed before delivery. Some families learned of their loved one's death only when personal belongings were returned months later. Dr. Elizabeth Harper was a nurse who worked at Waverly Hills from 1932 to 1948. She gave testimony to the Kentucky Medical Board in 1963. Her statement is preserved in state files. It describes conditions that were almost criminal. "We lost 3 to 4 patients every day during the worst periods," Harper stated. "The morgue could only hold 12 bodies, so we had to use empty patient rooms for storage. Sometimes bodies would sit for weeks, waiting for burial. Families couldn't afford to collect them." Harper also described the tunnel system beneath the hospital. It was originally designed to move supplies. It provided hidden access for staff. The tunnels became a pathway for removing the dead. Bodies were loaded onto carts. They were wheeled through underground passages to a loading area 500 yards from the main building. The families didn't need to see their loved ones being carried out, Harper explained, but the staff knew. "We called it the death tunnel. Some nights you could hear the cartwheels echoing through those passages for hours." The death tunnel was a concrete passage that ran 500 feet underground from the main building to the bottom of the hill. It was wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Steam pipes and electrical lines ran along the walls. The tunnel stayed at a constant 60 degrees year-round. Bodies were placed on wooden carts with metal wheels. The carts were heavy and hard to push. They made a grinding, scraping sound as they moved through the tunnel. The sound would echo off the concrete walls for what seemed like forever. Staff dreaded making trips through the death tunnel. The tunnel system ran throughout the hospital grounds. Steam pipes, electrical wires, and air shafts ran through concrete passages. They connected every building on the property. During bad weather, staff could move between locations without going outdoors. These same tunnels became legendary among ghost hunters decades later. Multiple ghost hunting groups claim to have captured voices in the underground passages. The recordings are available online. They feature whispered voices speaking names and phrases. Skeptics argue the sounds come from wind moving through air systems, but the voices often answer questions asked by investigators. The death toll at Waverly Hills was staggering, even by the standards of the tuberculosis epidemic. During peak years, the hospital was basically a warehouse for the dying. Recovery rates dropped as overcrowding increased. New experimental treatments often did more harm than good. Surgery procedures were performed without proper pain medicine. Patients remained awake during operations that removed ribs and collapsed lungs. The screaming could be heard throughout the building. Many patients died on the operating table. Others died from infections that developed afterward. Dr. Kleinert was known for his harsh methods and cold manner. He performed experimental surgeries on patients without telling them the risks. He believed that desperate times called for desperate measures. Many staff members were afraid to question his methods. The surgical suite on the 4th floor became a place of horror. Blood stained the floors and walls. Surgical instruments were often not properly cleaned between operations. Infections spread rapidly. The mortality rate in surgery was over 70% during some periods. Patients would be taken to surgery in the morning and never return. Their belongings would be gathered and stored until families could collect them, but many families never came. They couldn't afford to travel or were too afraid of catching the disease themselves. The children's wing held special horror. Kids as young as 4 were separated from their parents for good. They didn't understand why they couldn't go home. Many cried constantly for weeks after arrival. Staff had little time to comfort them. Some children stopped speaking entirely. They withdrew into themselves and waited to die. Play areas were set up in the children's wing, but they were often empty. Sick children had little energy for games. Toys were often contaminated and had to be burned. The few healthy activities were watched by overworked staff who had little patience for childish needs. Educational programs existed on paper, but rarely worked in practice. Children who stayed at Waverly Hills for months or years fell far behind in their schooling. Many who did survive and return home found themselves unable to fit back into normal life. The children's dining hall was a sad place. Small tables and chairs sat mostly empty. Children who could eat solid food were few. Most survived on liquids and soft foods. The sight of children wasting away at those little tables broke the hearts of even the hardest staff members. Christmas at Waverly Hills was particularly heartbreaking in the children's wing. Volunteers would bring gifts and try to create a festive atmosphere, but the children were too sick to enjoy much. Many spent Christmas Day in bed, too weak to play with new toys. Some died on Christmas Day itself. Letters from children at Waverly Hills to their families reveal the depth of their suffering. They wrote about being scared and lonely. They asked when they could come home. They promised to be good if their parents would just come get them. Many of these letters were never sent. 7-year-old Billy Murphy wrote to his mother in December 1938. His letter was found in hospital files decades later. "Dear Mama, I am very sick and I want to come home. The doctors say I have to stay here, but I don't want to. Can you please come get me? I promise I will be good. I miss you so much it makes my tummy hurt." Billy Murphy died on the 3rd of January, 1939. He was 8 years old. His mother never received his letter. She learned of his death when the hospital called 3 days later. She couldn't afford to travel to Louisville for the funeral. Billy was buried in the hospital cemetery with dozens of other children. The hospital cemetery was located behind the main building on a small hill. Simple wooden markers showed names and dates. Many graves had no markers at all. Families who couldn't pay for proper burial had their loved ones placed in unmarked graves. Over 900 people were buried in the hospital cemetery. By 1943, new antibiotic treatments were showing promise against tuberculosis. Streptomycin proved effective in treating early-stage infections. The number of new patients admitted to Waverly Hills began dropping for the first time in 30 years. The hospital converted sections of the building to house other medical conditions. Mental patients filled the third floor. The children's wing became a polio treatment center. By 1950, fewer than 150 patients remained in the building designed for 400. The conversion to other uses brought new horrors to Waverly Hills. Mental patients were often restrained in their beds for days at a time. Electric shock treatments were given without pain medicine. Patients screamed for hours after treatments. The sound echoed through the mostly empty building. The polio ward in the former children's wing was filled with children in iron lung machines. The machines made constant wheezing and clicking sounds. Children trapped inside could only see the ceiling. They relied on mirrors to see the world around them. Many spent months in the machines. The final blow came in 1961, when the Kentucky Department of Health ordered closure of all tuberculosis hospitals. Waverly Hills discharged its last patient on the 30th of June. Within months, the building was completely empty. The last patient to leave was 67-year-old Henry Walsh. He had lived at Waverly Hills for 12 years. He had no family and nowhere to go. The state found him a bed at a nursing home in Louisville. He died 6 months later, reportedly asking on his deathbed to go back to Waverly Hills. However, empty did not mean quiet. Almost immediately, local people began reporting strange things happening around the former hospital. Louisville police records from 1962 show multiple calls about lights and sounds coming from the supposedly vacant building. Officer Ronald Hayes responded to one such call in October 1962. His incident report describes finding unlocked doors and elevator buttons that appeared to have been recently pressed. Building supposedly empty, Hayes wrote, but elevator was running. I found warm food in what looked like a staff kitchen. No signs of homeless people or trespassers. Hayes returned to the building 3 more times over the following months. Each visit showed similar evidence of recent activity, but he never found any living occupants. His final report recommended that the building be secured better, but the state lacked money for proper maintenance. The first reported ghost sighting came just 2 months after the building closed. Mrs. Dorothy Sanders lived in a house at the bottom of the hill. She called police to report seeing a woman in a white dress standing at a 5th-floor window. When officers arrived, they found the building locked and empty, but Mrs. Sanders insisted she saw the woman clearly. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Waverly Hills became a popular spot for teenagers and urban explorers. Many reported meeting ghosts and unexplained events. A 1,974 newspaper article in the Louisville Courier-Journal documented several eyewitness accounts from local high school students. "We saw a woman in a white dress walking down the 3rd-floor hallway," said Jennifer Martinez, then 16. "She was carrying something that looked like a medical tray. When we called out to her, she just vanished, like she walked right through the wall." Another student, Thomas Wright, described hearing children laughing in the kids' wing. "There were kids playing somewhere in that building," Wright insisted. "We followed the sound for almost an hour, but every time we got close, the laughter would move to a different room." The most frequent reports involved the elevator system. It had been disconnected from power for over a decade. Multiple witnesses described hearing elevator machinery operating. They saw the floor indicator lights moving between floors. Some claimed the elevator doors would open and close when they asked them to. The elevator seemed to have a mind of its own. It would arrive at floors where people were waiting without being called. Doors would open to reveal an empty car. Sometimes the elevator would move between floors repeatedly with no one inside. The sounds of cables and pulleys echoed through the empty building at all hours. Security guards, hired to watch the building, reported the strangest experiences. They would hear footsteps on floors above them. Voices would call their names from empty rooms. Doors would slam shut with no wind or explanation. Many guards quit after just a few nights on the job. Guard supervisor Mike Thompson worked at Waverly Hills from 1975 to 1983. He kept detailed logs of unusual incidents. His records show over 400 separate events during his 8 years on the job. These included voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing, and elevator activity. Thompson never found a logical explanation for any of it. Thompson's most frightening experience happened in 1979. He was doing his regular rounds on the 3rd floor when he heard a child crying. The sound came from the children's wing, which had been sealed off for years. Thompson followed the crying through locked doors and empty rooms. The sound always seemed to be just around the next corner. After an hour of searching, Thompson found himself in the children's playroom. Toys were scattered on the floor, as if someone had just been playing with them. The toys had been stored away when the hospital closed. No one should have been able to access them. The crying stopped as soon as Thompson entered the room. Dr. William Peterson was a psychiatrist who researched haunted locations in the 1970s. He conducted interviews with 47 people who claimed paranormal experiences at Waverly Hills. His unpublished manuscript is housed at the University of Kentucky. It analyzes the psychological factors that might contribute to such reports. The building's history creates a powerful mental context. Peterson wrote, "Visitors arrive expecting to meet the supernatural. The rotting environment, combined with knowledge of the deaths that occurred there, primes people to interpret normal sounds and shadows as ghostly activity." However, Peterson admitted that some reports defied easy psychological explanation. Multiple witnesses independently describe identical ghosts in specific locations. The consistency of these accounts suggests something beyond simple suggestion or imagination. Peterson spent many nights alone in Waverly Hills during his research. He experienced several events he couldn't explain. Doors opened and closed in front of him. He heard voices calling his name. On one occasion, he felt someone touch his shoulder while he was alone in a room. He found no evidence of other people in the building. Modern ghost investigation began at Waverly Hills in the 1990s when ghost hunting groups gained access to the empty building. Equipment designed to detect electromagnetic fields, temperature changes, and audio oddities recorded numerous unexplained events. The Kentucky Paranormal Society conducted a week-long investigation in 1998. Their report documented over 200 separate incidents of unexplained activity. Electronic voice recordings captured whispered conversations in several languages. Thermal imaging detected human-shaped heat signatures in empty rooms. Motion sensors triggered repeatedly with no visible cause. Team leader Sandra Phillips described the most dramatic incident from their investigation. "We were in the surgical suite on the 4th floor around midnight," Phillips recalled. "Our equipment started going crazy. Every electromagnetic field detector was maxing out at the same time. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in less than 2 minutes." Phillips and her team left the room, but their audio equipment kept recording. The tape captures what sounds like medical equipment operating. Voices give surgical instructions. A child cries. The session lasted 47 minutes before the phenomena stopped as suddenly as they began. The recordings from that night remain some of the most compelling evidence ever captured at Waverly Hills. Multiple voices can be heard clearly. They use medical terms common in the 1930s and 1940s. The crying child sounds real and heartbreaking. Skeptics have tried to debunk the recordings, but have found no evidence of fraud. One voice on the recording clearly says, "Prepare the patient for pneumothorax." Another voice responds, "Scalpel ready, doctor." These were exact phrases used during the artificial pneumothorax procedures performed at Waverly Hills. The voices sound like they're coming from the same room as the recording equipment. Skeptical investigators have tried to debunk the recordings by analyzing them for evidence of fraud or misunderstanding. Audio engineer David Richardson examined dozens of electronic voice files from Waverly Hills in 2003. His analysis was published in the Journal of Paranormal Research. He found that while some recordings could be explained as mishearing or environmental noise, others contained clear human speech patterns that appeared genuinely strange. The vocal characteristics matched those of early to mid-20th century American dialects, Richardson noted. The terminology used in medical-related recordings is consistent with procedures practiced at Waverly Hills during its operational period. It would be extremely difficult for hoaxers to fake this level of historical accuracy. Richardson also noted that the voices often used medical terms that were specific to tuberculosis treatment in the 1930s and 1940s. These terms would not be known to most modern hoaxers. The pronunciation and accent patterns matched those of Kentucky residents from that time period. The building changed hands multiple times during the 1990s and early 2000s. Various developers proposed converting it into apartments, a shopping center, or a conference facility. None of these plans worked out. This was partly due to renovation costs and partly due to the building's reputation. One developer, Robert Mason, tried to convert the building into luxury condos in 1996. Construction workers reported tools disappearing and reappearing in different locations. Electrical systems would fail for no reason. Workers heard voices and footsteps in empty areas. After 6 months, Mason gave up on the project. He sold the building at a loss. Current owner Charlie Mattingly purchased Waverly Hills in 2001 with plans to restore it as a historical site. Mattingly is a Louisville businessman with interests in construction and real estate. He initially dismissed reports of ghostly activity. His perspective changed after spending several nights alone in the building during renovation planning. "I'm not someone who believes in ghosts," Mattingly stated in a 2005 interview. "But I can't explain what I've experienced in that building. Doors opening and closing, voices in empty rooms, equipment turning on by itself. Either the place is genuinely haunted, or there's some natural phenomenon we don't understand." Mattingly's first unexplained experience happened during his second night in the building. He was reviewing architectural plans in the former administrative office when he heard children laughing. The sound came from the children's wing, which was sealed off and inaccessible. The laughter lasted for about 10 minutes before fading away. On another occasion, Mattingly was inspecting the death tunnel with a flashlight when the light suddenly went out. He was in complete darkness, 200 feet underground. When he tried to turn around and head back, he heard footsteps following him. Every time he stopped, the footsteps stopped. When he moved, they started again. He made it to the exit and found his flashlight was working perfectly. Under Mattingly's ownership, Waverly Hills has become a destination for paranormal tourism. Overnight investigations are available for ghost hunting groups. Guided tours share the building's history with thousands of visitors annually. The tourism has generated new documentation of unusual phenomena. Digital cameras malfunction in specific rooms. Cell phone batteries drain completely within minutes of entering certain areas. Visitors frequently report feeling touched. They feel their clothes tugged by invisible hands. Tour guide Lisa Johnson has worked at Waverly Hills for over 10 years. She has seen thousands of visitors and witnessed hundreds of unexplained events. "Something different happens every day," Johnson says. "Doors opening, voices, footsteps, cold spots. I've gotten used to it, but it still gives me chills sometimes." Johnson's most memorable experience happened during a children's tour in 2015. She was telling a group of kids about the history of the children's wing when a ball rolled out of an empty room. The kids watched in amazement as the ball rolled across the hallway and stopped at their feet. Security cameras captured the entire incident. Room 502 was formerly a patient room on the 5th floor. It generates the most reports. Legend claims that a nurse killed herself there in 1928 after learning she was pregnant out of wedlock. While no hospital records confirm this story, the room consistently triggers unusual experiences for visitors. Michelle Thompson is a paranormal investigator from Ohio. She described her experience in room 502 during a 2018 visit. "I felt like someone was pushing me toward the window," Thompson said. "The temperature dropped so much that I could see my breath. My electromagnetic field detector registered readings that should be physically impossible in that environment." Thompson's team captured video footage that appears to show a see-through figure moving near the window. The footage has been analyzed by video specialists. They found no evidence of digital manipulation, but they cannot definitively identify the source of the strange images. The legend of room 502 has grown over the decades. Visitors report seeing a woman in a nurse's uniform standing by the window. She appears sad and desperate. Some witnesses claim she gestures for them to come closer to the window. Others say she tries to push people toward the opening. The window in room 502 overlooks the same courtyard where bodies were loaded for burial during the hospital's operational years. Some believe the nurse's spirit is trapped there. She watches over the area where so many patients took their final journey from the building. Visitors to room 502 often report feeling overwhelmed with sadness and despair. Some break down crying for no apparent reason. Others feel an urgent need to leave the room immediately. A few have reported feeling hands pushing them toward the window. Medical records from Waverly Hills were recently digitized by the Louisville Metro Archives. They provide new insights into conditions that might contribute to ongoing ghostly reports. The hospital treated 63,000 patients during its operational years. Of these, approximately 8,200 died on the premises. The records reveal that patient mortality was particularly high in specific areas of the building. The 5th floor, which housed the most critically ill patients, had a death rate exceeding 70% during peak tuberculosis years. The children's wing lost nearly half of its patients between 1925 and 1945. The concentration of death in certain areas might explain why ghostly activity is stronger in some parts of the building than others. The 5th floor, the children's wing, and the surgical suite generate the most reports. These were the areas where suffering was most intense and death most common. Patient records also reveal the personal stories behind the statistics. Mary Henderson, age 23, died in room 502 in March 1932. Her record shows she was 6 months pregnant when she died. This might be the source of the nurse suicide legend, though Henderson was listed as a patient, not staff. Dr. Sarah McNeil is a medical historian who has studied Waverly Hills extensively. She suggests that the building's design might contribute to ongoing phenomena. The architectural features created numerous dead spaces where sounds echo and bounce around, McNeil explains. Air currents move through the building in complex patterns. This could create unexplained noises and temperature changes. However, McNeil admits that architectural factors cannot explain all reported phenomena. The consistency of witness reports across decades suggests something more than environmental factors, she notes. Whether you call it paranormal activity or some unknown natural phenomenon, something unusual is clearly happening in that building. Recent technology advances have provided new tools for investigating unexplained phenomena at Waverly Hills. Infrasound detectors measure sound frequencies below human hearing range. Some researchers believe these might trigger psychological responses interpreted as supernatural experiences. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped previously unknown underground chambers and passages. In 2019, a team from the University of Louisville's engineering department conducted the most comprehensive study of environmental factors at Waverly Hills to date. Their report identified several natural phenomena that could contribute to unusual experiences. These included electromagnetic oddities caused by underground electrical systems. Infrasound, generated by wind moving through the building's complex architecture, also played a role. Yet the study also documented occurrences that could not be explained by known environmental factors. Temperature changes that went against the laws of physics. Electromagnetic readings that suggested localized distortions in the Earth's magnetic field. Audio recordings of voices speaking in areas where no humans were present. The investigation team was led by Professor James Mitchell. They approached the study from a purely scientific perspective. We wanted to identify natural explanations for reported paranormal activity, Mitchell stated. What we found was that while many phenomena have conventional explanations, a significant percentage do not. There appear to be aspects of this location that current scientific understanding cannot adequately address. The team spent 6 months installing monitoring equipment throughout the building. They recorded temperature, humidity, electromagnetic fields, and air pressure continuously. Motion detectors were placed in every accessible room. Audio recorders ran 24 hours a day. The data collected during this period was extensive and puzzling. Temperature readings showed impossible fluctuations. Electromagnetic detectors registered readings that should not occur naturally. Motion sensors triggered in empty, sealed rooms. Audio recordings captured voices, footsteps, and mechanical sounds with no identifiable source. One particularly strange incident occurred during the 3rd month of monitoring. All equipment throughout the building registered simultaneous anomalies at exactly 3:17 a.m. Temperature readings dropped 15 degrees in every room. Electromagnetic fields spiked to maximum readings. Motion detectors triggered on all 5 floors within a 30-second window. The team reviewed security footage from that night, but found no explanation for the synchronized anomalies. No one was in the building. Weather conditions were calm and stable. No electrical storms or other environmental factors could account for the readings. Professor Mitchell described the 3:17 a.m. incident as the most compelling evidence of coordinated paranormal activity I have ever documented. The simultaneous nature of the readings across the entire building suggested some kind of intelligent control rather than random environmental factors. Today, Waverly Hills remains one of America's most documented, allegedly haunted locations. Thousands of visitors report unusual experiences annually. Television shows, documentary films, and paranormal investigation groups have recorded hundreds of hours of audio and video evidence. The building itself continues falling apart despite restoration efforts. Broken windows allow weather and wildlife inside. Graffiti covers many walls. Floors have collapsed in several areas. This makes some sections impossible to access. But according to those who know the building best, the unexplained activity shows no signs of getting weaker. Security personnel report the same phenomena documented for 60 years. Lights in empty rooms, sounds of medical equipment, voices calling names of patients who died decades ago. Charlie Mattingly is now in his 70s. He still owns Waverly Hills and continues leading tours despite failing health. His perspective on the building's mysteries has evolved over 2 decades of ownership. I've learned to accept that there are things in this world we can't fully understand, Mattingly reflects. Whatever is happening at Waverly Hills, whether you call it ghosts or energy or something else entirely, it's real enough that thousands of people have experienced it. That has to mean something. The children's wing remains particularly active, according to recent reports. Visitors describe hearing laughter. They see toy balls rolling down empty hallways. They find handprints on dusty surfaces. The sounds match historical accounts of child patients who spent their final years in those rooms. Children's voices are among the most commonly reported phenomena at Waverly Hills. The voices sound young, scared, and lonely. They call for their mothers and fathers. They ask when they can go home. They wonder why no one comes to visit them anymore. Investigators have tried to communicate with these child voices. They ask simple questions and receive responses that seem appropriate for young children. The voices know their names and ages. They remember details about their illnesses and treatments. They express confusion about why they're still at the hospital when they feel better. These interactions are particularly heartbreaking for visitors who understand the history of the children's wing. Many of the young patients who died at Waverly Hills never understood what was happening to them. They were too young to grasp the severity of their illness. They died confused and afraid, separated from everyone they loved. One recorded interaction between an investigator and a child voice is particularly moving. The investigator asks, "What's your name, sweetie?" A small voice responds, "Tommy, I'm 6. Where's my mummy?" When asked how long he's been at the hospital, the voice says, "A long time. I want to go home now." The death tunnel beneath the hospital has become a focal point for paranormal investigation. The concrete passages are now partially flooded and filled with debris, but they still echo with unexplained sounds. Investigators report hearing cartwheels moving through the tunnels. They hear voices calling names. The tunnel system extends throughout the property in a complex network. Steam pipes and electrical conduits run alongside the main passages. Side tunnels branch off to storage areas and mechanical rooms. The entire underground system feels oppressive and threatening to most visitors. Walking through the death tunnel is a disturbing experience even for skeptics. The concrete walls seem to absorb light. Sounds echo strangely. The air feels thick and hard to breathe. Many people report feeling watched while moving through the passages. Recent investigations in the death tunnel have captured some of the clearest voice recordings ever documented at Waverly Hills. The concrete walls and enclosed space seem to amplify paranormal activity. Voices are clearer and more distinct than in other parts of the building. One investigation team recorded what sounds like a funeral procession moving through the tunnel. Footsteps, quiet conversations, and even what sounds like someone crying can be heard on the recording. The sounds move from one end of the tunnel to the other over a period of 20 minutes. Recent investigations have employed increasingly sophisticated equipment. Quantum field detectors measure energy fluctuations. 3D mapping software creates detailed models of the building interior. Night vision cameras capture movements invisible to the naked eye. The evidence continues accumulating. Thousands of photographs show unexplained lights and shadows. Hundreds of audio recordings feature voices and sounds with no identifiable source. Video footage captures doors opening and closing, objects moving, and figures appearing and disappearing. Medical equipment left in certain rooms occasionally turns on despite having no power source. Elevators move between floors when the electrical systems are disconnected. Temperature readings show patterns that go against the laws of thermodynamics. Some investigators theorize that the intense suffering experienced at Waverly Hills created a form of psychic residue. This energy continues, showing itself decades after the hospital's closure. Others suggest that electromagnetic oddities in the building create conditions that help paranormal phenomena. The building's limestone construction might play a role in the ongoing activity. Limestone is known to have properties that can store and release energy. The massive amounts of emotional energy released during Waverly Hills' operational years might have been absorbed into the very structure of the building. Skeptics continue trying to debunk the reports through scientific analysis and investigation. Many phenomena have conventional explanations involving environmental factors, psychological suggestion, or equipment malfunction. But a core group of unexplained occurrences resists rational explanation. The debate continues among researchers, investigators, and visitors. Is Waverly Hills genuinely haunted by the spirits of patients and staff who died there? Do environmental factors create conditions that generate unusual phenomena? Or is something else entirely happening in those abandoned halls? The questions multiply with each new investigation. Why do phenomena cluster in specific rooms and areas? Why do some visitors experience intense activity while others encounter nothing unusual? What connection, if any, exists between the building's tragic history and current unexplained events? New theories emerge regularly about what might be causing the ongoing activity. Some suggest that traumatic events can create tears in the fabric of space and time. Others propose that consciousness survives bodily death and can interact with the physical world under certain conditions. The isolation protocols enforced during Waverly Hills' operational years might have contributed to the current phenomena. Patients who died alone and forgotten might still be seeking the human contact they were denied in life. Their spirits could be trapped in the building, unable to move on to whatever comes next. The theory of residual haunting suggests that strong emotions can imprint themselves on physical locations. The fear, pain, and despair experienced by thousands of patients might have left permanent marks on Waverly Hills. These emotional imprints could replay like recordings, triggered by the presence of living people. Waverly Hills stands as testament to one of medicine's darkest chapters. Desperate families sent loved ones to isolated facilities with little hope of recovery. The building housed unspeakable suffering. Perhaps something of that anguish lingers still. The sheer scale of death at Waverly Hills is staggering. Over 8,000 people died within its walls during 50 years of operation. Each death represented a life cut short, dreams unfulfilled, and families torn apart. The collective weight of so much loss and grief might have permanently marked the building. Some investigators believe that the high number of sudden, unexpected deaths contributed to the ongoing activity. Many patients died without warning, giving them no time to prepare mentally or spiritually for death. These unprepared spirits might remain confused about their condition, not realizing they have died. The children who died at Waverly Hills present a particularly sad case. Young minds had no framework for understanding death. They might remain trapped in a childlike state, still playing and calling for their parents decades after their physical bodies are gone. Whether the reports represent genuine supernatural phenomena, misunderstood natural occurrences, or elaborate psychological illusions remains unclear. What is certain is that Waverly Hills continues attracting visitors seeking answers to questions that may have no definitive solutions. Modern paranormal investigators continue visiting Waverly Hills with increasingly sophisticated equipment. Each investigation adds to the growing body of evidence that something unusual is happening in the abandoned hospital. The activity shows no signs of diminishing despite the passage of time. The building itself continues deteriorating with each passing year. Windows break, walls crack, and floors collapse. But the unexplained phenomena persist, regardless of the building's physical condition. Whatever is causing the activity seems independent of the structure's decay. Local residents have learned to live with their famous haunted neighbor. Some embrace the tourism and economic benefits it brings to the community. Others wish the building would simply be demolished and the land put to different use. But most acknowledge that Waverly Hills has become part of the area's identity. The legend of Waverly Hills has spread far beyond Kentucky through books, television shows, and internet forums. It has become a pilgrimage site for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world. The building's reputation continues growing with each passing year. Recent investigations have focused on trying to understand the intelligence behind the phenomena. Are the voices and interactions coming from conscious spirits? Or are they simply echoes from the past, playing back without awareness? The evidence suggests a mix of both possibilities. Some voices respond directly to questions and seem aware of current events. Others repeat the same phrases or actions regardless of outside stimulation. This pattern suggests that multiple types of paranormal activity might be occurring simultaneously at Waverly Hills. The hospital's medical records continue providing new insights as they are digitized and studied. personal stories of patients emerge from the files, giving names and faces to the statistics. Each story adds depth to understanding what life and death were like at Waverly Hills. Recent analysis of mortality patterns shows that deaths occurred most frequently between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Interestingly, this matches the time period when paranormal activity is most commonly reported today. The connection between historical death patterns and current phenomena is striking and difficult to explain through conventional means. The seasonal patterns of activity at Waverly Hills also match historical data. More phenomena are reported during winter months, which corresponds to when the highest number of patients died historically. The tuberculosis epidemic was always worse during cold weather, leading to increased mortality at the hospital. Temperature monitoring throughout the building has revealed consistent cold spots in areas where the most deaths occurred. These cold spots persist year-round and seem unrelated to heating, ventilation, or structural factors. Some measure as much as 20 degrees colder than surrounding areas. The electromagnetic readings at Waverly Hills continue to puzzle scientists. The patterns don't match any known natural phenomena. They seem to concentrate in the same areas where paranormal activity is most frequently reported. The correlation between electromagnetic anomalies and ghost sightings is too consistent to be coincidental. Photography remains one of the most controversial aspects of paranormal investigation at Waverly Hills. Thousands of photos have been taken that appear to show unexplained figures, lights, and shadows. While some can be explained as camera malfunctions or tricks of light, others remain genuinely puzzling to experts. Digital cameras seem particularly sensitive to whatever forces are present at Waverly Hills. They malfunction in specific rooms with startling regularity. Batteries drain completely in minutes. Memory cards become corrupted. Images appear on cameras that weren't visible to the naked eye when the photo was taken. Video evidence from Waverly Hills includes hundreds of hours of footage showing doors opening and closing, objects moving without explanation, and figures appearing and disappearing. The consistency of these recordings across different investigators and equipment types lends credibility to their authenticity. Audio phenomena remain the most compelling evidence from Waverly Hills. The electronic voice recordings capture clear, intelligent responses to questions. The voices use period-appropriate language and medical terminology. Many voices can be matched to specific patients through hospital records. The death tunnel continues to produce the most dramatic audio evidence. The enclosed concrete space seems to amplify and preserve sound in unusual ways. Conversations, footsteps, and mechanical sounds echo through the passages with startling clarity. Some recordings capture what sounds like medical procedures in progress. Modern forensic audio analysis has confirmed that the voices recorded at Waverly Hills are genuine human vocalizations. They show proper breathing patterns, vocal cord vibrations, and speech characteristics that would be extremely difficult to fake. The analysis also confirms that the voices often come from areas where no living people are present. The ongoing documentation of activity at Waverly Hills has created one of the most comprehensive databases of alleged paranormal phenomena ever assembled. Thousands of reports from hundreds of investigators over decades create a detailed picture of what might be happening in the abandoned hospital. Patterns emerge from this massive dataset that would be impossible to see from individual experiences. Certain names are called repeatedly by the voices. Specific medical procedures are reenacted again and again. The same apparitions appear in identical locations to multiple witnesses across decades. These patterns suggest some form of organized intelligence behind the phenomena rather than random events. The spirits at Waverly Hills, if that's what they are, seem to maintain memories, relationships, and routines that mirror their lives as patients and staff. For some visitors, Waverly Hills provides proof that life continues after death. For others, it represents an elaborate collective delusion fueled by suggestion and expectation. The truth probably lies somewhere between these extremes, in a realm of human experience that science has yet to fully explore or understand. The abandoned hospital keeps its secrets, just as it kept the secrets of patients who died within its walls decades ago. In those empty corridors where hope once flickered and died, something persists that defies easy explanation. The mystery of Waverly Hills continues to deepen with each investigation. New phenomena are reported regularly. Old patterns continue unchanged. The building seems frozen in time, preserving not just memories, but perhaps the very essence of what happened there during its darkest years. Whether driven by spirits of the dead, unknown natural forces, or the power of collective belief, Waverly Hills remains active and compelling. The voices still call out in the darkness. The footsteps still echo through empty halls. The suffering of the past continues to reach across decades to touch the present. Like and subscribe if you found this investigation intriguing. Let us know in the comments whether you believe locations can retain imprints of the traumatic events that occurred within them.